Hello, everyone. Good evening or good afternoon, depending on where you are all logging in from. My name is Scott Sinclair. I'm the Senior Manager of Programs here at Cancer and Careers, and I am thrilled to have everyone here. For those of you who are dialing in from your phone, if you could let us know by sending an email to cancerandcareers@cew.org with your name and the number that you're dialing in from. That way we can confirm your attendance and make sure you receive all of the relevant follow-up information after today's webinar. If you are new to Cancer and Careers, first of all, welcome. Again, we're glad to have you. We were founded in 2001 to support every person in every industry and every job so that they can thrive in their work and their life after a cancer diagnosis. Cancer and Careers also works with companies to develop their internal systems of support for employees navigating illness at work. This slide has a list of all of our free programs and services that we offer for people with cancer, as well as their caregivers, healthcare providers, and coworkers. These include a comprehensive website and library of publications that are available in both English and Spanish, career coaching, resume review, financial and technological grants, access to experts for one-on-one support, and educational events like the one you're about to see today. And I will be back on at the end of Julie's presentation to hear a little bit more about what we have coming up. So some quick housekeeping before we get started. If you experience any technical difficulties during today's webinar, please refer to our Zoom guide, which is linked in this slide and is also being shared in the chat right now, or reach out to Zoom support using the contact information on this slide. Also, please note today's presentation is copyrighted. Therefore, the use of AI assistants and/or transcribing or recording devices of any kind by attendees is not allowed. Those found to be using AI or other recording transcription software during CAC programming will be removed from the event. You will be permitted to return to the event without the AI recording or transcription software. Also, real-time closed captioning is available for today's event for those who need it, and a captioned recording of this webinar will be archived on our website following the session. Now, to request any additional reasonable accommodations, please send an email to cancerandcareers@cew.org at least 24 hours before the next live session. For those of you who are seeking continuing education credits, this slide lists all of the organizations who have accredited today's webinar, as well as the required steps for getting a certificate. This information is also available on our website. And please note you are required to complete both the evaluation and pass the post-test. To access those will be shared throughout the webinar today. And if you're unable to complete those today, that is totally fine. You will receive an email with the link sent by tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. Now, also for those planning to request continuing education credits, our accrediting bodies require us to share this slide and let you know that there are no conflicts of interest to report. Now, as for everyone and after, and as you might know, Zoom has a lot of great features which you can use to interact with today's event as it's happening. You'll see a chat box in your features panel. Feel free to use this to communicate with our speakers, CAC staff, and other attendees. However, it's important to note that the chat box is not private and it will show your first and last name. So that's something to be mindful of when or if you decide to use it. Now, if you have any questions about today's content, we will have a Q&A at the end of Julie's presentation. Please submit those questions in the Q&A box, also in your features panel, not the chat box. There's a chance that we'll miss them if they get in the chat box instead of the Q&A box. And we know the importance of privacy, so there is the option to submit your questions anonymously in the Q&A box. We'll do our best to answer anyone's questions, but please be patient. If we don't have time for your question today, please send us an email at cancerandcareers@cew.org, and we'll make sure we get you a response as soon as possible. Now, additionally, your feedback on this program means the world to us. All of us at CAC are dedicated to creating the best possible programs, and it's through hearing from you, your insights and observations, what worked, what didn't work, that we can learn to make the best of everything that we can. So not only do your voices make a big difference in helping us to help others, Sharing your experiences with our funders anonymously it can illustrate the true impact of their support and allow us to continue to offer these webinars free of charge. Now, you can access the evaluation for today's webinar using this QR code, or a link is being saved in the chat box, as well as the email that will be sent tomorrow. So thank you in advance for taking the time to share your thoughts. Now, thanks in part to Genentech and P&G Beauty, Cancer and Careers is proud to offer this 11th year of the Balancing Work and Cancer webinar series, which was created to provide anyone whose life has been touched by cancer with concise, targeted information about work-related issues that arise after a diagnosis. Additionally, we would like to recognize Cancer and Careers as year-round sponsors who support all of our core programs and allow us to continue providing all resources and services free of charge. Now, before I hand it over to Julie, I want to help set the stage for today's discussion. So let's briefly take a step back to look at the bigger picture of what people often experience looking for work after a cancer diagnosis. There are many challenges and unknowns with any job search, which can bring up a range of emotions. There can be days where you get a bunch of calls for interviews where you feel great, followed by days where it's a nonstop challenge. Now, sometimes this cycle feels like it can repeat itself over and over again, and it's not at all uncommon to feel overwhelmed or even burned out by the process. So it's important to look for opportunities to take actions. This can help you feel more in control of your experience. So despite those inevitable ups and downs, and push past any feelings of stuckness or frustration in the process. And one way to do that is to take time to refine your resume. Now, we've brought in an incredible partner to help you do that today, but again, before I hand it over, one quick thing to note about privacy. At Cancer and Careers, we've noticed over the years that people in the cancer community tend to hold themselves to a higher standard than others who are looking for work. Often survivors, they feel obligated to share more of their health history or personal information than they have to or they should, and more than somebody without a cancer diagnosis would ever consider sharing. But the reality is generally, there is no obligation to disclose any details of your health or your health history, either at work or during a job search. And we also encourage people to think carefully before they share any personal information about their health or their health history online. And while it's certainly the case that is less public than social media platforms like Facebook or LinkedIn, AI is still an emerging technology in its best practices. So you want to think about that as well. So what, if any, information should be shared online? And we'll touch a little bit on that later on. Now, there are many components to looking for work, and a resume remains the essential tool in a job search process. But more and more, a LinkedIn profile is just as critical. So whether you're changing careers or returning to work after time off, or simply looking to highlight a specific skill or experience, your resume and your LinkedIn profile tells your story. And to take us through this topic, I am thrilled to welcome back Julie Jansen. Julie is a speaker, trainer, coach, and author who has helped thousands of professionals find success and satisfaction at work, as well as find work that they find gratifying. Julie is one of our original coaches at CAC. I don't even remember how long she has been working here. That is how long it's been. And additionally, Julie is the coach who does our resume review service, which we hope that you'll utilize after today's webinar. So like I said before, there will be time for questions after Julie's presentation if you want to drop those in the Q&A box. But without further ado, I am going to hand things over to Julie.
Thanks, Scott. So for some reason I have my video on, but it's not working.
I can see
Switch.
you.
You can? Okay, I just can't see myself. And then the slides are very small, so I don't know how to fix that. Can you give me control, Scott?
Yeah, you should have it, but we can also move it for you if you want.
Oh, I'm fine with moving it. Well, hi, everyone. I don't want to hold you all up. Um, so, uh, the slides, is there any way we could make the slides bigger, maybe somehow? Because I'm not sure. Oh, there we go. I got it. Yay. Okay. So, hi, everyone. It's great to be here. I've been doing, by the way, Scott, I've been volunteering at Cancer and Careers for 19 years, believe it or not. 18 or 19, I think it is. So it's a long time. So let me just talk to you a little bit about the um, intro of, Scott touched upon like some of the psychological aspects of job search and how difficult it is. And I'll tell you, the feedback I get about resumes is consistent. People do not like writing resumes. They're fearful of writing resumes. They don't know how to do it. They don't know what to say. I've never actually met a human being who says, I love writing resumes, except maybe me, which is funny. So, but your resume, believe it or not, you can't conduct a job search without a resume. And as Scott said, LinkedIn, which we'll dig into a little bit later, is just as important in a different way. They're both very different documentations of your experience and what you want your future to look like job wise. So, but it's a big obstacle for people, and I say you've got to update your resume regularly. You just kind of open it up and dump stuff in it, and but people don't do that. And I get a lot of calls from people saying, "I have a resume emergency." So instead of doing a giant overhaul, try to just dig in and throw stuff in there, a couple times a year or whatever. And I always like to do a little piece of history about the resume. The origin of a resume actually started in feudal England. It was a letter of introduction from a lord or a head of a guild when, of course, it was when a man traveled to another part of the kingdom. And then it evolved to be calling a curriculum vitae, or CV, which actually means literally course of one's life, and then finally became known as a resume, which is French for summary. Generally speaking, most Europeans still call the document a CV, and people in every other part of the world, except for maybe Canada and parts of North America. But in the last 10 or 15 years, most other countries have moved to the American resume format. So how do you think about your resume? Well, it's a marketing document, and and it's very important to remember that. Um, and it's about selling. And even if you don't like to sell, you are selling yourself. You're not bragging. You're merely talking about things that you did, that you achieved, and how you made a difference and the problems you solved. It's not, certainly not, a regurgitation of everything you've ever done in your career. And there are actually three separate audiences for your resume: ATS software, which we'll jump into a little bit later. That's applicant tracking system software, which you'll hear the stats that I'll share with you about how many companies actually use it, and it's a lot. A recruiter, who usually does the screening once you get past ATS, and then the line manager who actually gets what your job is. So what do you need to write your resume? Well, you need accomplishments, and you need keywords, and you need succinct history. So some of the things that you can refer to, some resources for writing your resume, would be job descriptions from your current or past jobs, if you still happen to have them. Any past performance reviews. I mean, I know companies run the gamut to how great their performance review process is or how non-existent it is. But if you do get performance reviews, there's usually some focused goals with metrics, and those are great for popping onto your resume. Online job postings, they're pretty consistent as far as the keywords and the phrases they use for specific types of jobs. And then, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, creating a master resume list on your computer to use sort of as a file that you can cut and you can paste. So nobody reads your resume word for word. Nobody reads your LinkedIn profile word for word, that's for sure. They'll skim through it in 30 seconds, and it's pretty similar to a menu where there's menu design professionals who design a menu so that people will look at the most expensive items first, and they'll look at the most decadent items first, and things like that. Well, resume is very similar in the way that people look at it. So they'll look at their name and your name and where your geography is. They'll look at your headline. They'll read your summary. They'll look at your job, recent jobs, and they'll pop over and look at your education. So it's kind of like that. So, but nevertheless, you still, even though you know that that's the case, that people don't really read the whole thing, you will spend many hours rewriting and rewriting and rewriting your resume. And would I would just challenge you to say, please don't show your resume to 52 people, because 52 people will have changes. And at some point, you just have to say this is good. There aren't typos, there's keywords in there, etc. But your goal is really just to help. Once it gets past ATS, your goal is to help the person make the decision to read it again or put it in the yes pile. So some of the things that are no-nos are a lot of content, long paragraphs, long sentences, large blocks of text. Never use personal pronouns. I always have to explain that to people, that you can use personal pronouns on your LinkedIn profile. You certainly will use them on a cover letter. You'll use them on a blog. You'll use them in a bio, but you don't use personal pronouns on a resume for whatever reason. That's just one of those hard and fast rules. And you want to really start every single sentence or statement or phrase on your resume with a strong action verb. And I'll be showing you a list that when you get copies of this, you can kind of take that list and use those. And it's really easy to consistently use the same one. When I write resumes, I find myself always checking Mr. Thesaurus or Mr. Synonyms to find out, like, what other words can I possibly use, so I don't sound so repetitive. Most resumes should be 2 pages. 1 page is for entry level, although I'm seeing an interesting trend with people who are entry level, because I coach a lot of people who are in college, recent grads, or maybe 2 to 10 years out of college. And they're having more and more internships, co-ops are coming back. So now they're having trouble fitting their resume on 1 page. So I'm reassuring people like that and saying it's okay if it's a page and a half, as long as it's not a really dense 2 pages. And then I do see plenty of 3 page resumes for C-level people, CEOs, CMOs, CHRO, and those kinds of jobs. And it is okay if you've got like 15 plus years of experience. It's absolutely okay to leave off earlier jobs. And remember that there's some, weird job titles. Like, I've been getting some communication from people that work for the federal government that have been impacted by the layoffs. And I am not a government specialist. I really navigate the corporate world, not government. And so I don't even know what they're talking about with their titles. They mean nothing to me. And so I always say, if let's just figure out what the equivalent because they want to get into the corporate world if possible, or higher ed or a nonprofit. And so let's figure out what the equivalent title is, and then I'll put in parentheses equivalent to a specific title, and that helps the reader understand what that is. Resumes always must have a profile or a summary on top. That's a brief paragraph where the reader can actually get all the relevant information about you from that paragraph. And then many hiring professionals will tell you that when doing a first screen of resumes, the summary is all they'll read before putting it down into the, yeah, I want to meet this person pile. So, and it's also a good place to put some personal traits, not too many, but just some of the personal / professional traits that differentiate you. And you don't want to, I think I say this a little bit later, you want to say effective communicator, because we're all pretty much expected to be effective at communication, even though we know we all aren't, but that's important. And 88 keywords for ATS, of course, 80% of your content should be achievement statements versus responsibilities. I so frequently see resumes with, I did this and I did this and I did this, this was my job. And I feel like I'm just reading job postings, job descriptions, so the achievements are the hardest thing for people. And I'll be jumping into a formula to help you figure out how to write achievements. I had someone today call me about a resume, and she was, I'm trying to think of what her job was. Oh, she has a job with a town, and I live in Connecticut, so near me. And I wasn't really sure what her job was, but she said, I don't have any achievements. I just go in and do my job. And I said to her, well, I mean, I once helped some people that all they did was empty the garbage all day, because they worked in a facility that was the size of 4 football fields. And we were able to come up with some actually quantified achievements for them. that had to do with the environment and had to do with efficiency. And they were stunned, that we could even come up with those. So there are achievements no matter what your job is. Um, I mentioned before not using trite or cliche phrases. Also add a headline, just like on LinkedIn. It could be just describing the type of job that you're looking for, or it could be like some people have different kinds of expertise. Like I'm writing a resume right now for a guy who's the head of IT for a company, and they just asked him to take over the product development team. So he's got two titles. So that's what I put into the headline. And you definitely always place your education, your certifications, any professional development courses you've taken after your professional experience. The exception to that is I'm writing an academic higher ed guy wants to be an adjunct professor, just relocated from New York City to Pittsburgh. So he's looking at Pittsburgh based universities. And there, with that kind of resume, I put his education first because he's got a couple master's degrees, and that's typically required for to be an adjunct professor. So that's the exception for that. And there are exceptions to everything that I'm talking to you about, of course. And professional memberships are always great. And for those of you who have been out because of treatment, or you just haven't been ready to go back to work, if you've done any kind of volunteer or community service, that's great. And in fact, employers want someone who's well-rounded, who doesn't just work. So that's always a good thing to add as well. And doing the same thing that you would do with jobs, which is adding actual achievements that not just saying you were a volunteer or you're a member of blah, blah, blah. So visually appealing, you don't want your resume to be just compressed with content. So white space is important. And these are my favorite fonts. I tend to use um, just these 5 here that are listed on the slide. We don't put full addresses on resumes anymore because of identity theft and because of privacy. So you can just put like a general sort of geography. You could like if I'm in the Metro New York area, so sometimes we'll just put Metro New York area. And then you never mention references or list them. Obviously, you're going to provide references. You don't want to be putting your references contact information on your resume for the world to see. So and it always surprises me that that doesn't occur to people. So the next thing, oops, I'm too hasty with my fingers here. So action verbs, there's a million of them. And I just say, kind of use different ones as I mentioned earlier. And this is a list of a bunch of them. And then when you're writing accomplishments, so let's just kind of jump into that. Uh, it's hard to do this. So I was coaching someone, he has a third interview. I was coaching him today, and he's got a third interview tomorrow. And he said, I have problems coming up with examples when I'm answering interview questions. He said, I'm not good on in the spur of the moment communicator, a spontaneous communicator. And most people really aren't. Even if you practice, you can't possibly practice for every single possible interview question you're going to be asked. So I said to him, well, the formula that I use when I write resumes, when I write accomplishments is I kind of talk about what was the problem, and then what did you do to fix the problem, or what was the issue, or what needed to be improved, and then what happened. It's those 3 things. So you can think of like the woman that said she didn't have any accomplishments today. Did you receive an award or a special recognition? Did you increase efficiency? Or have you solved problems? Did you use fewer resources? Did you achieve something in your career for the first time? And the last one here, did you develop, create, design, or invent something? So you just need some prompts. And if you do use AI, Scott was talking about that earlier, you can use, prompt AI and just say, what would be some accomplishments that a banana peeler would have? Well, the banana peeler peeled more bananas than anybody else on the team. And that AI will give you some great accomplishments for that instead of having to think of them from scratch. So that's maybe a way to look at it. And then just, are you managing or training or mentoring people? Did you save the company any money at all? Have you increased sales? I mean, not everybody's in sales, but when you were promoted, I mean, it's having progressive experience is a great achievement. And because it says that the company, relies on you and trusts you. Did you increase production, and did you find problems that nobody else saw previously? So those are some of the sort of prompts for trying to think of what your accomplishments were. And then this is the next couple slides are going to be the actual formula. So as I mentioned earlier, what was the existing problem, need, or situation? So I'm giving you an example here. So this is an administrative person, and as administrative support for two directors, and this is you just like writing this out. This is not what's going to actually go on your resume. This is just the methodology, and then you'll see the final slide I show you will be the actual accomplishment statement that will go on your resume. But as administrative support for two directors, I was asked to manage the expense approval process for 15 employees in two departments. And then this person saw that there were 3 forms that had to be filled out, and they were on 3 systems, 2 legacy systems that were going to go away. And so the employees basically just found it such a pain in the neck, even though they wanted their expense money, they really procrastinated with filling out all the forms. And this person, this admin person, had to chase these people constantly. And then she was getting yelled at by finance, and she was spending way too much time. So that was the problem. And then what did she do about it? She took all 3 forms and created 1 form, which seems very simple, but nobody had done it before. And then she presented it to the 2 managers. One of them was great, let's do it. And the other one didn't really care. And so she went to the manager that was interested in doing it and said, can you talk to this other manager and persuade him or her? And so they did do that. And then the other manager agreed that it was a good thing, because you do want to think about obstacles and barriers. If you can get that into the accomplishments or achievements, and by the way, accomplishment and achievement are interchangeable, but if you can get that into that statement, then that's, even more impactful. And then finally, what was the result that you produced? And I mean, this is a tad bit long, but 8 months after implementing the new form, 100% of the employees were submitting their expenses on time, which gave this person the time to focus on other responsibilities. Employees appreciated the new, easier process, and she was no longer getting nagging emails from finance. So you could cut this down, obviously, but I did the full achievement statement, so just because you could see what it would read like. So anyway, and then this is the bullet: redesign monthly expense submissions. I'm not going to read it to you, but that's the bullet that ended up being on the resume. So let's jump into AATS. Well, ATS has been around a really long time. It's AI essentially, but it's used by most companies, I would say, except very small companies. So if you look at this statistic, 99% of Fortune 500 companies use ATS for scanning and storing applications. 70% of larger companies use ATS, and then about 20% of small and mid-sized businesses use ATS. But you just don't know who's using it. You're going to make the assumption that when you're going through the application process that it is being used, and so that's why you have to be cognizant of sprinkling keywords throughout your resume. And here you can see the average when I say corporate, I'm using that loosely. Like, it could be nonprofits, it could be universities, it's companies in general, but on average, the posting gets 250 to 350 applications. And it's probably even higher right now because unemployment is pretty high. There's a lot of people that are being laid off. I get at least a call every other day from someone who just lost their job, and across industry. So, but they're still hiring, which is the good news. It's a funky, I like to say it's a funky market. And companies will screen in basically 6 to 8 applicants, not really more. And what's important to know about ATS is that ATS eliminates the least qualified candidates versus identifying the candidates who are the best fit. So they use algorithms based on years of experience, specific education, qualities, and they knock people out versus, oh, Julie, Scott Sinclair is a great fit, we're going to include him. It doesn't work that way. It's actually the opposite. So you want to optimize your resume with keywords, and you want to, use keywords, hard and soft skills. And the good way to get keywords is just to find 3 to 5 job descriptions. I always make people send me links for jobs that they think they're qualified for, 75, 80% of whatever the job is. And then I'll go through and scan it with, picking out the keywords that are repeated quite a bit. And then there are what are called word cloud generators that identify words used frequently. And there's some of them listed here. They all start with word clouds, word it out, word art. And those actually help you identify the keywords if it's tough for you to do it manually. And then you want to, oh, and one thing that I wanted to say is save, I don't know why this is here in my notes, but save your resume as a PDF is not always compatible with all ATS software. So even though a PDF is great because it doesn't change, nothing can change in it, play it safe and stick to a Word document or a .doc or .docx file if you can when you're saving your resume. So that was what I wanted to mention. And then the focus of frequency and placement of the keywords. So it's great. I always put a bulleted keyword section on a resume, but it's really important to sprinkle those keywords throughout the entire document. Obviously you're not going to put keywords that you don't have. You're not making things up, but 2 or 3 times repeating those keywords is a good idea. And there's plenty of real estate on a resume for you to be able to do that. And then the bulleted keywords I either call areas of expertise, skills and expertise, or one of my favorites is core competencies. Spell out, rule of thumb on a resume, spell out a word and then use the abbreviation in parentheses after that. And then throughout the rest of the resume, you can use the abbreviation. But you also, if you're applying for a specific job posting, you want to see like how they're referring to it. So if they're saying SEO, then you're going to use SEO. If they're saying search engine optimization, then you'll use that. And then know that ATS gets very confused by things like images and color and tables and graphics and weird bullets. So, and you can get a free resume review. They do want you to hire them to rewrite your resume. So you have to be a little cautious about that. But Top Resume, Job Scan, and Skill Roads are some of the ones that are pretty good for doing that. And as Scott mentioned, I do the resume review service. So happy always to review your resume, and it's a free service, and give you feedback, which I do. I give very comprehensive feedback. Okay, so let's jump to cover letters, another favorite of people's. Everyone loves cover letters. I don't know why these stump people. Mine are short and sweet when I write them for people. They're an intro paragraph, a couple bullet, 3 bullets, of concluding paragraph, and that's it. And whether it's in an email or an actual cover letter, but I'm always asked, do I have to write a cover letter? And unless the application process states that they do not want you to write a cover letter, then you should write one. Most cover letters, of course, are written for someone you don't know. So you're kind of thinking about your cover letter as customized direct mail, but it's also a way to sell yourself, and it is also scanned. So you're going to have the same kinds of keywords in your cover letter, but you're going to be hopeful that someone might read your cover letter eventually if you get to that place. So opening up with something kind of interesting, it might be just about the company, something interesting about the company, which you should have in a cover letter. I mean, because you don't want your cover letter to look like a template that you just kind of cut and paste, even though we all do that. You want to look like you've customized it a bit. If it's an email, then be thoughtful about your email subject line. Its best email subject line is, of course, someone referred you, but most of the time we don't have that opportunity. And again, as I mentioned, just a short intro paragraph, 3 bullets of this. This is why my experience aligns with what you're looking for. Bullet, 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 and then not these big long paragraphs. And then make sure you proof it. And if you can follow it up, sometimes you can find the person that would be reading your cover letter, but you always want to try to find an individual, a human being that either worked at the company or does work at the company that might be able to help walk your stuff down the hall, as I like to say, is an old-fashioned way of describing it. so that, you get help from a human being. So you're not just one of hundreds of applications. LinkedIn. So now we'll jump into LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn for my clients. It's very useful. It isn't Insta, it isn't TikTok, it isn't Facebook. It's very useful from a business perspective. There's no reason to be resistant. There's no reason to be afraid. So, and one of the first things an HR professional or recruiter will do if they're going to be interested in you or interview you is they are going to Google you and see what your social media activity is. And hopefully you have most of your stuff on private settings, but LinkedIn is the most widely used business-oriented social network in the world. There are currently 1.15 billion people in 200 countries that are members of LinkedIn. I'm not suggesting that 1.15 billion people are active on LinkedIn. That's not the case. But the highest number of users are, of course, in the United States. Right now, we're about 234 million people, and about 140 job applications are submitted via LinkedIn every day. I mean, I'm sorry, every second, not every day. And then it's also a good content channel. And so it doesn't, you don't have to go crazy, building a robust LinkedIn profile because nobody's going to read it really. The thing they might read is your about section, and they probably might read the recommendations. So I do recommend having recommendations. Recommend. So, but how do you find jobs using LinkedIn? So, excuse me. So it's optimizing your profile, of course, with keywords, which you've heard me say ad nauseum. You can fill out the little section that says, let recruiters know you're open to opportunities. It's a brief questionnaire. Basically, it just asks you for 5 titles. And sometimes it's hard because there's not every title in there. So you have to kind of um, be flexible, about the titles you put in there. It asks you about your geography. It asks you if you want to work remotely, hybrid. And then if you're going to use the open to work photo frame, which I'm not really a fan of that, I think it's a little strange, and it also just lets the entire world know that you're looking for work, and I just don't like it for some reason, but I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's just my personal professional preference not to use that. But there's the option, let recruiters know you're open to opportunities. People always say, well, my company's going to find out. No, your company will not find out. They're not looking to see if you're looking for work, and they're looking to refill your job with someone else, most likely. So it's very slim chance that they would even know. And it's really just recruiters using Boolean search methods. So, and then what happens is you can set up your settings for, like, I just do it for a lark, because I've been self-employed for so long. I'm not going to go work for anybody at this point, but I always have set up career coach and executive coach and resume writer. And I do get some really interesting jobs that I kind of look at sometimes. And I'm intrigued, how much are they paying and that kind of thing. So definitely leverage those tools on LinkedIn. And then, your headline, people tend to default to your job title for your headline, which is fine, but you have room for 220 characters in your headline. So I would suggest you load it up. You can have your job title and then just put some other skills or areas of expertise in that headline, so that it's a little bit more robust. And then you don't need a professional headshot. It's so tiny anyway. Colors probably recommended. Black and white is fine. And I do like putting the banner behind you because it looks kind of lost without a banner. It looks, and there's so many different kinds of banners that you can find and cut and paste and upload. And this is mine. I think this is from last year, though. I'm embarrassed to say so. It's probably a little inaccurate, but this is basically mine. And so you can see I have a banner that's kind of like my logo. And then just I use what I do work-wise for my title because it's more understandable. People kind of know what all that stuff is. They don't know what a vocational expert is usually, but that's mine. So and then the about section, I really like that section, and I feel like that's the one section that you can be a little bit more creative if you want. Um, but I think it's a vital, don't avoid, filling that out. and you have 2,600 characters. I mean, you're not going to use 2,600 characters in your about section, but you can just create it in a Word document and then spell check it and then just paste it in and hit save. And you've got, and I'm writing someone's right now, and I'm kind of having fun with it because LinkedIn isn't too creative, but this is giving me a little opportunity to, be innovative. So, and then what else can you add? Well, it's LinkedIn divides the information on your profile into core information, the recommended, and then additional. And you can see there's all sorts of things that you can put in the sections. The core information is what you really want to have fully loaded. But if you've got certifications and you've taken projects or you have a, volunteer experience that you're proud of, then by all means, add it in, because it's nice to have sort of a more fully developed LinkedIn profile. Skills and endorsements. So that's a funny little section. The endorsements don't really matter that much. It's the skills that LinkedIn about, I want to say 6 months ago, said now we limited adding 50 skills. Now they just raised it to 100 skills. So if you don't have 100 skills on your LinkedIn profile in your skills and endorsement section, you should. And you want to be careful, like as it says here on the slide, when you're typing in something. So let's say I type in CAREER, career, and down drops all these career related, keywords. Pick one of those because those are the ones that are most likely to show up in searches. If you start making up keywords just because you feel like you're being creative, that's definitely not the place to do it. When your contacts endorse you for skills, and I don't really see people endorsing that much anymore. I'm not even sure why that's still a feature, but what happens is the most endorsements you have, like I think one of my most largest endorsements is executive coaching. So executive coaching rises to the top. But you can reorder your keywords. And I always reorder so that the 3 keywords that I want to be visible when you don't have to open up the whole section, people see those 3 keywords. That's what you want them to see. And so you can be very intentional about choosing those, and what you want to add. But it is an important section for sure. Recommendations I mentioned. 3 to 5. I mean, I've been in business so long, I probably have I even have one from someone at Cancer and Careers. But they're nice. And you just want to make sure you coach someone and tell them what you want them to stress. Because one time I was in sales and I was applying for a sales job. I didn't want to be a sales manager anymore. And the person that was writing my recommendations said, she's a great sales manager. And I didn't want that to be emphasized. So, people think of you the way they think of you. And it isn't necessarily what you want that focus to be. So I'm always very careful about saying, would you mind stressing this and talking about this? And you do have to approve the recommendation. And you can either invite them to write you a recommendation through LinkedIn, or you can email them directly if you want. But those are a nice thing. And people tend to let this kind of fall by the wayside and not pay too much attention to this particular section. Reviewing your stats. This is your dashboard. They can only be viewed by you. So it tells you if you post things, how many post impressions you get, how many profile viewers, how many followers. This is from last year for me, but how many search appearances, and whatever you do with it. Some of you don't really care about this. It kind of depends on whether you're trying to really increase your visibility or whatever. So, but it's kind of, I always have it fun to read and kind of look at who's looked at me. And then the last thing I wanted to really bring up before we jump into Q&A is the biggest question I get is, well, what do I do on LinkedIn? I create a profile and there it is. And hopefully recruiters are going to be reaching out to me, but I don't really know how to spend my time there. So here's some recommendations. So I would, obviously make sure you're updating your LinkedIn profile with if you got a promotion, and you can change the settings so that people can't see that you made a change. And that you go to the help and it'll, all this stuff will plop down and you'll see how you can change visibility settings and things like that. It's pretty easy to do. But just keep it updated and look at it and decide if it's stale. Did you create a LinkedIn profile like 4 years ago and you haven't done anything with it? So it's nice to kind of keep it fresh, and it helps you remind yourself of what you've done and what you've achieved. And then also, I mean, be selective about who you invite to connect and who you accept invitations from. But because what happens is, don't be too selective, but what happens is when people will reach out to me and say, I see this happened to me yesterday. I see you're connected to blah, blah, blah. And I'm looking at blah, 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 and I have no idea who this person is. Well, I've been on LinkedIn since 2004, pretty much when it started. So, I mean, those were the days when you just accepted invitations from everybody. And now you want to be a little more selective. So the chances of me going to blah, blah, blah person and saying, hey, we're first connections, I'm helping someone and she's interested in your company, her responsiveness probably won't be as strong. And that actually did happen with there were two people that they just didn't respond. One did, fortunately. But anyway, and you don't just have to connect with people who you've met in person, but it is a great jog your memory to like Scott just went to a conference, and if he met, however many people that he wanted to connect with, hopefully he's going to jump on LinkedIn and just start connecting with all those people. And then just when it's a wonderful form for helping people, and people kind of forget that. So it's not just for you and what you need, but it's helpful for a lot of people in a lot of ways. So just be courteous and respond to people if you get a request, even if you can't help them. Just say, "Oh, I'm sorry. I see what you're asking. I'm sorry. I don't know that I can help you." And then the final thing is really spending 15 to 20 minutes a day on LinkedIn searching for people or companies and reading posts, because you never know what leads you'll get, people you can connect with, companies you can learn about. Because whenever a company is listed on LinkedIn and someone's job experience, they automatically have a company page developed for them. It may not be very full, but it does exist. So those are some activities that you can do on LinkedIn. And now I'm going to turn it back to Scott.
Thank you, Julie. That was wonderful. I see questions already coming in. Just a few quick housekeeping things before we get to those Q&A questions. And again, if you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A box. These are just some of our job search resources. Feel free to visit them. Once again, I'll give a plug for the resume review service, which is really, really wonderful. Thanks to Julie. We have gotten great feedback from people who have had their resumes reviewed there. You can order a job search toolkit, which is one of our publications. You can either we ship it for free anywhere in the US, or you can download a PDF copy of that as well. And we also have our Ask a Career Coach section of our website where you can ask questions and get answers as well. Now, upcoming webinars next month, we're going to be joined again by Julie for career shifting. So if anybody's interested in changing careers, moving on to something else, you'll want to join us for that. After that, we have our Balancing Work and Cancer webinar, which is sort of an overview of our core content here at CAC. And then we have a two-part Communicating Effectively session that's going to be in September and October. So we hope you'll join us for that if you're not already registered. And then coming up in just a few weeks is our national conference. That's going to be an all-day conference happening on Zoom with different speakers, panelists. It's going to be a really great event, and I hope you'll join us for that. And then later on in the year, we have our West Coast conference. Those used to signify where we did them physically in person. Now that they've gone to Zoom, they're mostly just about the time zone they're happening in. So you can join the West Coast conference even if you are on the East Coast or in the Midwest. So don't let that hang you up on anything there. And then we hope you'll follow us on social. These are all of our handles, as well as my email address. If you have any questions or need anything, feel free to reach out to me. And then this again is for anybody requesting CEs. This has a list of all of the accrediting bodies, as well as the requirements for those. Again, you need to fill out the evaluation and the post-test, which I believe Maite is going to drop a link to the eval in the chat. You'll also get an email tomorrow, no later than 5 p.m. with links to all of that as well. And I'm going to leave this slide up as we go into Q&A, which again is for evaluation. You can scan this if you want to pull it up on your phone rather than click through it in the chat. But we hope that you will fill out the eval, even if you're not requesting CEs. It really helps us to have your feedback there. Okay, so Julie, I'm gonna jump in with the first question. That is a question we get every single time. I think you probably know what the question is gonna be. But that is, what do we do about a gap in your resume, especially
You
if
know,
it was due to cancer treatment?
it was always our most popular question before the pandemic, and now and my answer was always very different. And now what I say is, it doesn't really matter what that you have a gap. What matters is that you feel comfortable with what your response is if you do get a question about it. And there's the opportunity to do what LinkedIn does, which is I did this on a resume the other day. I put career break because the guy had got fired from a couple jobs. His mother was sick and he had all sorts of issues. And so we put career break and just put a little sentence. So you can do that as well. Or you can just not acknowledge the gap and then again just be comfortable with a response if you are asked. And this, I think Rebecca Nellis is the one who invented this, but then the swivel, which is, and the reason I'm so glad that I'm here talking to you is I know that I could really contribute. So you're swiveling it back to the positive and not dwelling on what you're feeling very self-conscious about.
Yeah, you don't want to ignore the question, but you want to make sure you have a response ready to go if
Yeah.
that is something you're worried about. And it can be as simple as something like, I was dealing with a family issue. It's all settled now, and I'm really excited to get back to work and, whatever you're interviewing about, and bring the
Yeah,
conversation back to
exactly.
your skills or your something you're excited for about the job, and, take control of the conversation back. Uh, the next question I have here is, can I have more than one LinkedIn profile? I've worked in two different fields.
Yeah. No, you cannot. It's too confusing. Um, it's hard, you're going to have connections on one and connections on the other, and you can't really merge them. So there's a way to just say, talk about the two different types of jobs you've had in your about section, and then to list both of the two different types of jobs in your experience. So you're just, kind of merging those together on one LinkedIn profile, but by all means, do not have more than one LinkedIn profile.
You don't want somebody to go, which one is the real Julie Jansen, and
Yeah.
have them both be you. And I don't think it's a problem to have two different kind of industries or identities in
Not
there.
at all. The only
It,
downside that now that you mention that, Scott, is unfortunately, you still have to choose one industry when which I don't understand why LinkedIn doesn't get rid of that because
yeah.
people are so versatile now and have side gigs and side hustles but so you do have to choose a primary industry. It doesn't let you not choose an industry.
And I would assume you want that to be the one that you're applying for or into
Yes. Or the
instead of
one that you
your,
spent the most time, or yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Uh, let's see what we have here. So if someone was at the same job for a very long time in a very senior role, can a one-page resume be okay?
I don't recommend it. I don't know why you would have a one-page resume. I mean, people are very focused on that. It's kind of like I'd rather drown than give a speech, and it's like I have to have a one-page resume. It's been floating around for like a century. And so it's just
I think,
how do you
sorry, no,
fit all your experience on one page?
that's what I was just gonna say. If you've been somewhere for such a long time, then you have a whole list of accomplishments that you've
Yeah,
achieved, even if you don't think so, or even if you think that you only do one thing every day. If you sit down and think about it, you really could make a list of, I
yeah.
updated this system, I created this program, I managed these people,
Yeah,
you really
exactly. And you've
can,
got education and volunteer service and certifications and professional memberships and, all that stuff too.
yeah, I agree. Uh, so here's one. I'm having interviews but not getting hired. Any suggestions?
Well, I mean, that's a general, I mean, it's hard to get feedback. Generally, companies aren't going to give you feedback about why they're not bringing you back for another interview or hiring you. So I would just suggest that you practice interviewing more. I do a lot of mock interviews with clients, and I'm not suggesting you hire me, but I mean, just find someone who can interview you, because it's probably you're either not responding to the questions in the way that they want to hear, you're not talking about the skills or experiences or achievements that they're looking for. You're not asking maybe the right questions. You may not be as confident. So I hate to say it, and it is very competitive out there. I'm not saying it's just about, the person that asked this question and how they're performing in an interview, but you do have to work very hard to stand out.
Yeah, and we have different resources on our website. If you shoot us an email to cancerandcareers@cw.org, I'm happy to forward those along to you as well of how to prepare for an interview, practice questions you can go through, that kind of thing. The kind of one piece of advice I would give is make sure you're being specific about things too in an interview.
Yeah,
You don't want to go in there and just say, I went to this job and I did this thing. Like you want to, when asked how you solved a problem, you want to have a specific example. You want to say,
yeah,
last year I was working on this project and the day before this whole thing happened, and here's what I did to solve it. And
exactly.
explain the issue and explain how you solved it, because that's what people are really looking for. They're looking for creativity in problem solving. They're looking for how you use your mind and how that might be applicable to the job that they're looking for. So the more specific you can be, I think also is a
Yeah,
great thing to
that's a
keep
good
in
advice,
mind.
Scott. Yeah.
So I think this is going to be our last question. If we didn't get to your question again today, I'm so sorry, but please reach out to cancerandcareers@cew.org. We are monitoring that email throughout the week. So if you think of something next week or a month from now or whenever, we can still answer your questions for you. But the last one I have here is there are many challenging physical changes like hair loss. How can you address that for individuals who are sensitive to such a recent change in regard to a headshot or a profile picture on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I've had this question quite often, and I think is it an option to wear a headscarf? Is it an option to wear a wig? Is it an option to have a silhouette um, photo? I think you have to feel comfortable, and if you don't, then I wouldn't be putting your headshot on LinkedIn until you do feel comfortable. But Scott, you weigh in on this one
I
too,
think
if you
you
don't
can
mind.
also, I think you could use an old photo too, like before
Yeah,
treatment.
that's true.
It's a little different when you show up to an interview if you have a full head of hair and you show up in a headscarf. That might, invite some questions, but for the most part, I think people aren't really looking that closely at the headshot anyway. They're
They're
looking,
not.
they're just kind of double checking what's on your resume is what's on LinkedIn and looking at your recommendations and that kind of stuff. So I
And
wouldn't,
it's not to discount how you feel about it, because it's understood that you feel very sensitive and
yeah,
vulnerable. But Scott's right. It's not what you look like that they're
no one,
hiring.
no one's not going
Yeah.
to hire you because you walk
No.
in and they say, well, my picture on LinkedIn is from 10 years ago at my brother's wedding. I really should update it. My hair is completely different. I've gained weight. I've changed, like all this stuff has happened in the past 10 years, but I just haven't
But
noticed.
I don't recommend that, Scott.
I know, I should, but maybe I'll go after this and change it. Well, Julie,
That's funny.
thank you so much. I'm thrilled that this is not a goodbye, just to see you next month. For right now, I hope that everybody
Yeah,
will join us again next month to hear more from Julie.
that
Uh,
sounds great. Thanks,
yes,
Scott. I
thank you.
appreciate it.
And
Bye,
again,
everyone. I'll see you in July, hopefully.
yes. And again, if we didn't get to your question, cancerandcareers@cew.org is the email you can reach out to about this webinar, about any real challenges that you're facing. So we hope to hear from you soon. Take care.